So you need to distinguish this kind of language. That is his position. And he also says, whatever you write, it should have sense and it should have attention and so on. So now that was higher regions. William Emerson, he talks about 7 types of ambiguity. It is not that language is free from ambiguity. For the first time, semantics became very, very important. Meaning, negotiation of meaning with the text. When a reader reads the text, how he negotiates meaning with the text, how he builds meaning, and what he derives from the text. Okay, so later we'll talk about the interpretation. Because around this time, there flourished something like hermeneutics, the art of interpretation, hermeneutical text. Okay, so now post-structuralist, post-colonial, post-modern, right? Modernism, all are related to what we call the world which saw itself before the Second World War. Then the world that was emerging, quickly emerging after the Second World War, the reconstruction of the broken world, the reconstruction of the world destroyed by war, reconstruction of cities, reconstruction of ultimately the human mind which has started despairing because of 2 world wars, which also produced what we call the existentialist philosophy. There was a loss of faith in God. Why? Because the faith in God did not prevent the wars. So, loss of faith in God, loss of faith in what we call an external supernatural agency in control of the world. Now, all these things compounded together and it produced something like a postmodern um, uh, criticism, which started questioning, I'll come to that, questioning human existence, human identity, and the linguistic construction itself, the construction of the text. Okay. So, post-structuralism, aligned with the post-structuralism is Jacques Derrida's deconstruction. So, you construct a text, you have a structure, and you collapse the structure and try to derive it. It is not complete destruction of meaning, but reconstruction of meaning. Now, aligned with post-structuralism is feminism. Now, feminism talks about a social structure, a hierarchy, which is dominated by patriarchy and patriarchal thinking. Now, collapsing that structure and destroying that structure, that is also closely aligned with the post-colonialism. The colonial mindset that talks about exercising control, maneuvering what we call maneuvering the world, the reality of the world, manipulating the reality of. So, how the colonialists, for instance, they made us believe only the Westerners were capable of ruling over others. They were capable of inventing things. They were capable of developing a scientific mind. They were capable of controlling the world. Now today, we have deconstructed all that. We have decolonized our minds, especially the Chinese and the Indians. They have done it, and the Japanese and the Koreans. They have done it admirably, completely deconstructing the Western thinking. Right. Now, come back. So, post-colonialism. Then, a renewed interest in history and the role of history in human thinking and also in constructing modern day reality. We talk of new historicism. Another literary theory that emerged after the Second World War. So, post-structuralism, post-colonialism, postmodernism, historicism, then you have deconstruction, feminism, and another important uh, theory to emerge is a reader response theory, also known as reception theory. What is this reader response or reception theory? How a text is received. We receive a text, for instance, from different standpoints. Who I am helps me to negotiate meaning with the text, understand the text. So I respond to a text as a male, or as a female, or as a white, or as an African American, or as an Indian, even as a South Indian, so, or as a Chinese. So how I respond to a text, my racial identity, my gender. See, gender and race, these are categorical identities. Categorical identities, we know that now this identity cannot be changed, right? So unless you choose to change your sex, right? So now you cannot change the color of your skin, right? Race and gender, right? Then even the ideology that you have, your faith system, your personal ideology, many of these things come into play when you interpret the text or when you try to understand the text. So this is also important. So the whole notion of the other developed, right? Me and the other, I and the other. So that also developed during this time. Okay, now before I lose time, another important theory to emerge during this time was after the 1990s, what we call eco-criticism. Because of, now look at this, the modernist era, postmodernist era, the production technology, and large-scale pollution, and large-scale exploitation of Earth's precious resources, all these resulted in a world which provided us with creature comforts, at the same time robbed us of clean air, robbed us of clean water, robbed us of our right to live in a world that is free from pollution. Right? So, eco-criticism, as we term it. Then, what happened? Then came the 20th century, later the 21st century, something like post-humanist thought. That is, humanism, which started during the Renaissance, which went on to become humanitarianism in the 19th century. Then, in the 20th century, it continued with the human rights violations, and so on. Then the world saw itself the large-scale invasion of technology into our body. And we started talking about longevity, how to live longer, and how to change our body parts, and how to go for organ donation, many things like that. So everything changed. We slipped into what we call a post-human world. It is here with us, and we are in that post-human world. Then, along with it, again, the importance of race, critical race theory, as we call it CRT, critical race theory, which is very important because just a couple of years ago, they talked about Black Lives Matter. Even after Barack Obama becoming the President of the United States of America, who won the presidential election on his own merit. Race is back. Even today, racism is back. As I look at the American presidential election fought between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, race is again in the forefront. Kamala Harris is branded as a mixed person born to a African and American and an Indian. So she is of mixed origin, and race is at the center. Right. So critical race theory. It talks about a race. Now, a race may be very important, but not all that important in electoral politics, as the Americans are demonstrating repeatedly. Uh, so we'll wait and watch. Then, critical disability studies. Now, the disability is in our list. Disability, congenital disability that follows us from our birth. Then disability because of accidents, because of diseases, and which renders us disabled. Right, for example, polio has rendered thousands of children disabled. The way they walk, the kind of a limp, right? Now the number is reducing. So it is one form of disability. And we are also talking not only about physical disability, but also mental disability. The World Health Organization has recognized depression as a disease. Depression as a disease. Okay. So we are moving into a complicated world with the arrival of public acknowledgement of respect, public acknowledgement of the existence of people with sexual orientation or sexual identity, which we call LGBT and so on. Right? So now the world has completely changed, and literature written by these people. Apart from that, there is another category called migrant literature, and diasporic literature, refugee literature, and even we talk about digital humanities. So the number keeps increasing. So our critical theory also keeps expanding and improving and increasing. So what to study, how to study, where to start after 1945. So what we have done is, in the name of cultural studies, we have brought all of them together, whether it is media studies or feminist study or any of this, we have this broader umbrella term, right? A critical term which we call cultural studies, and under which we club everything together so that we can talk freely and easily about every subject. Ultimately, these so-called verities means theories. They are about life and literature. Okay, so I'll just focus your attention in another half an hour after giving a elaborate introduction and things like that, introducing, for example, something like diasporic literature. Now, is we also use the term immigrant culture. Is it a distinct culture? Nations were built by immigrants. A nation like Canada, a nation like Australia, a nation like New Zealand, they were all built by immigrants. But America itself is a nation built by immigrants. So people talk about identities, hyphenated identities, in between us. They borrow terms from a man like Homi Baba, who talks about the colonial identity as a hyphenated, post-colonial identity as a hyphenated identity, which can also be applied to diasporic groups and the kind of in-betweenness. So that is, you are neither here nor there. Okay. So Uma Parameshwaran, for instance, she is from Mylapore and she has settled down in Canada. She talks about that. She has found an interesting phrase like the Tirishan, right? Now, you know the story of King, who's never went there and came. And we talked about Tirishan Sorghum also, right? Now, she has come up with a beautiful expression, right? An image that which we can call to our memory to define in between us, right? That's correct literature. So now we also talk about multiculturalism. Now, multiculturalism is in place in such nations. India itself is one of the oldest examples of multicultural society, a pluralist society. So, and this society has been in existence for more than 3,000 years now. Now, amalgamating, accepting, bringing together so many languages, so many people groups. So, one of the world's best examples for multiculturalism is our own country. But nations like America or even England, Great Britain now, which saw even Rishi Sunak as the Prime Minister for a brief time. So now there are many instances. So the world is changing and we are slipping into new identities and things like that. So now settler culture, diasporic literature is very, very important. Okay, now I'll just focus your attention on a few things and with that I will call it a day. One of those things is the most important thing to emerge was post-colonialism. Now, the moment you talk about post-colonial theory, the names that come to your mind are someone like Edward Said. For example, Edward Said, when he wrote his Orientalism, he was very, very clear. Now, he was clear about what? The thinking that east is east, west is west, and never shall define. So people came to this country to explore the language, to learn the language. India boasts of two of the oldest languages in the world. One is Sanskrit, the other one is Tamil. Right. So literature written in Sanskrit initially attracted the world leaders. They came, they explored, and they came up with interesting theories, racially motivated theories. And later, they talked about the superiority of their own culture because they were ruling over us. They were here as colonialists. So now, what happened was post-colonial literature it emerged, and later it got enriched with terms like colonialism, anti-colonialism, neo-colonialism, neo-imperialism, Orientalism, Commonwealth literature, Third World literature, new literature in English, and so on. But the important fact is it takes into account nationality, ethnicity, gender, subjectivity, language, and again, the power of what we call the creative enterprise as well as the new critical enterprise. So now literature was getting interpreted in terms of your identity, your post-colonial identity, and how the imperial project of enlightenment failed, but in its place came a new project that is for people of the past colonies to use the language of the colonizer to strike back against the colonizer, to tell the colonizer about one's own cultural richness, one's own, if not cultural superiority, or inferiority, about one's own cultural importance. So, and it talks about post-colonial literature and the it, it takes a stance which we can say anti-colonial. The colonial aesthetics was different. They wrote about this country, they wrote about these nations, how they were, the English were dominating, the Spanish were dominating, the French were dominating, and so on. So now, what post-colonial literature did was to dismantle a notion given by someone like Rudyard Kipling in White Man's Burden. What was the white man's burden? To rule over such nations, dispense justice, create a governing system, and so on. It thoroughly dismantled this white man's burden. There is nothing called white man's burden. It was white man's exploitation across the globe, and post-colonial literature made it very clear.